Kimi Antonelli had 4th place in Hungary, the championship lead, and a clean path toward another huge result. Then the FIA reviewed one yellow flag moment, and his entire weekend changed. 3 grid positions lost. 1 penalty point added to his super license. 4th place became 7th, behind George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, Charles Leclerc, and Lando Norris. But the most shocking part is not the punishment. It is the data. The stewards found that Antonelli's speed reduction lasted only briefly. He passed the incident area slightly faster than on his previous quickest lap. His mini-sector was only 0.03 of a second slower, and his total speed reduction was less than 1%. The recommended penalty was 5 places. He escaped with 3 because the yellow flag appeared suddenly after Verstappen spun, and Antonelli had limited time to react. Now the championship leader, 45 points ahead of Hamilton, starts one of the hardest races for overtaking from 7th place, while Ferrari and McLaren appear stronger than they have all season. And the real disaster may not be where Antonelli starts. It may be what this penalty forces him to risk before the first lap is even finished. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this penalty is so dangerous, you have to look at the exact moment that triggered it. Antonelli was running directly behind Max Verstappen during the final phase of qualifying. Verstappen then spun at the final corner, turn 14, and a single yellow flag appeared in the section Antonelli was approaching. That flag carried one simple message: danger ahead. Reduce speed. Antonelli did react. The stewards accepted that. But according to the official review, the reaction was too brief, too small, and not sustained long enough to satisfy the rule. And this is where the numbers become impossible to ignore. Antonelli's speed through the incident area was slightly higher than it had been on his previous fastest lap. His mini-sector time was only 0.03 of a second slower than his best. And the total reduction in speed was less than 1%. Think about that for a moment. A yellow flag was active because a car had spun ahead, yet the difference between Antonelli's normal qualifying speed and his speed through that danger zone was almost invisible. That became the central problem for the stewards. They were not deciding whether Antonelli touched the brakes for a moment. They were deciding whether he showed a clear and meaningful reduction in speed. Their conclusion was no. And under the penalty guidelines, that type of offense normally carries a 5-place grid drop. But Antonelli did not receive 5 places. He received 3. The stewards considered 2 important factors. First, he had limited time and distance to react because Verstappen's spin happened suddenly. Second, Antonelli did make some attempt to reduce his speed, even though the reduction was judged insufficient and too short. That saved him from the full recommended punishment. But it did not save his qualifying result. 4th place became 7th. And that changes the race immediately. Instead of beginning near the front, Antonelli now starts behind Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and his Mercedes teammate, George Russell. That is not just a different position. It is a completely different opening lap. From 4th, Antonelli could have focused on attacking the leading group. From 7th, he must also protect himself from the cars behind while trying to recover ground ahead. And at Hungary, that is a serious problem. The Hungaroring is narrow. The corners arrive quickly. Following another car can disturb the airflow and make the front tires lose grip. It is like trying to run through a crowded hallway while everyone ahead is moving just slowly enough to block your path. You may be faster. You may know exactly where you want to go. But speed means very little when there is no space to use it. That is the first consequence of the penalty. The second is pressure. Antonelli arrives in Hungary leading the Drivers' Championship by 45 points over Hamilton, following his victory in Belgium 1 week earlier. That advantage means the penalty does not place his championship lead in immediate danger. But that does not make the situation comfortable. Ferrari and McLaren had shown some of their strongest pace of the season during the weekend. Starting behind both McLarens, a Ferrari, Verstappen, Hamilton, and Russell means Antonelli cannot simply wait for the race to come to him. He needs progress. But here is the trap. If he attacks too aggressively, he risks damaging his tires or becoming involved in contact. If he waits too long, the leaders may escape before Mercedes can create a strategic opportunity. And the penalty carries another consequence that will remain long after the Hungarian Grand Prix ends. Antonelli also received 1 penalty point on his super license. A driver who reaches 12 penalty points within 12 months receives an automatic 1-race suspension. Antonelli is still far from an immediate ban, but he already carried points from incidents during his rookie season. So this is not only about losing 3 places in Hungary. It is another mark on a record that follows him into future races. The FIA also issued Antonelli a warning for driving too slowly and exceeding the required minimum time during his in-lap after the session. That detail may not change the grid, but it adds to the picture. This was not a quiet end to qualifying. It was a session that left Antonelli with a grid penalty, a license point, a formal warning, and a far more complicated race than the one he had earned on pure speed. But the biggest danger is still ahead. Because 7th place puts Antonelli directly inside a group where every driver has a reason to attack, defend, or take a strategic gamble. And once the lights go out, the FIA decision will no longer be a document. It will become a problem Antonelli has to solve at full speed. And that is where Antonelli's real challenge begins. Starting 7th does not simply place 6 cars ahead of him. It changes the kind of race he has to drive. From 4th, he could have focused almost entirely on the leaders. From 7th, he must think about traffic, tire temperature, overtaking opportunities, and the risk of losing even more ground before Mercedes can use strategy to help him. That sounds manageable. But at the Hungaroring, it is not. This circuit punishes drivers who become trapped behind another car. The corners follow one another quickly, and once the air reaching the front wing becomes disturbed, the car can lose grip exactly where the driver needs confidence. Antonelli may be faster than some of the cars around him. That does not mean he can pass them easily. And this is the first major trap created by the penalty. The championship leader may feel pressure to recover immediately. He knows he qualified 4th. He knows the grid now shows 7th. He knows that every lap behind another driver is a lap in which Norris, Leclerc, Piastri, Verstappen, Hamilton, or Russell could begin pulling away. That pressure can make the opening lap feel more important than it really is. But one desperate move can turn 3 lost positions into a much bigger disaster. Antonelli must find the balance between urgency and control. Too cautious, and the leaders disappear. Too aggressive, and he risks contact, tire damage, or losing momentum in the wrong part of the circuit. And the drivers ahead will understand exactly what he needs. They know he wants to recover quickly. They know he may be willing to attack early. They know that forcing him to stay in dirty air could damage his race without requiring a single risky defensive move. That gives them power. A driver ahead does not always need to fight Antonelli wheel to wheel. Sometimes, simply placing the car correctly through the corners is enough to keep him trapped. And every extra lap changes the strategy. Mercedes may have prepared its race around Antonelli starting from 4th. That would have meant a cleaner first stint, fewer cars to pass, and more freedom to choose the ideal pit window. Starting 7th removes some of that freedom. Now Mercedes may need to react to what the cars ahead are doing. If Antonelli cannot pass on track, the team could try to use an earlier pit stop to move him into clear air. But that creates another problem. An early stop may force him to complete a longer final stint. That means protecting the tires for more laps. And if the tires begin to fade before the race ends, the positions gained through strategy could be lost again. Mercedes could also choose to leave Antonelli out longer. That might give him fresher tires later. But if he remains trapped in traffic during the opening phase, the time lost may become impossible to recover. That is the strategic conflict. Stop early, and risk the end of the race. Stay out, and risk losing the race before the final stint even begins. And here is where the championship situation makes everything more complicated. Antonelli arrives in Hungary with a 45-point lead over Hamilton. That advantage is significant. It means he does not need to treat one difficult race as a championship emergency. But championship leaders do not become champions by giving away opportunities. He still has to score strongly. He still has to prevent rivals from gaining momentum. And he still has to decide how much risk is acceptable when the penalty has already taken control away from him. That decision may define his entire Sunday. Because Antonelli is not chasing from the back. He is starting close enough to the front that a strong result remains possible. That makes patience harder. When victory feels impossible, a driver can focus on recovery. When the podium still looks reachable, every lost second feels more painful. And Antonelli will be surrounded by drivers with their own reasons to push. Norris and Piastri will be protecting McLaren's strongest weekend of the season. Leclerc and Hamilton will be fighting for Ferrari. Verstappen will not surrender position easily. Russell, starting directly ahead of Antonelli, will also be racing for Mercedes. That final detail may become one of the most important. Antonelli's first target is his own teammate, and Mercedes will have to manage that situation carefully. Russell has every right to defend his position. Antonelli has every reason to attack. But an internal battle can damage both cars. If they fight too aggressively, they could lose time to the drivers ahead. They could hurt their tires. They could even create the kind of contact that turns a difficult afternoon into a complete disaster. Mercedes must therefore decide how much freedom to give both drivers. The source does not provide any team orders or internal strategy instructions. But the grid position alone creates an obvious tension. Antonelli needs to move forward. Russell needs to protect his own race. And Mercedes needs both cars to score. That is not an easy balance. It becomes even harder if Antonelli appears faster. The team may face a choice between allowing the cars to race, or asking Russell to avoid delaying the championship leader. Either decision would carry consequences. Let them race, and Mercedes risks losing time. Intervene, and Russell may feel his own result is being sacrificed. That is how one FIA penalty can spread beyond the punished driver. It affects the opening lap. It affects the tire plan. It affects the pit window. And now, it may affect the relationship between teammates. But the most dangerous consequence may arrive later. Antonelli also received 1 penalty point on his super license. He remains far from an immediate suspension, but the point does not disappear after Hungary. It follows him. And that means every future incident carries slightly more weight than it did before. A mistake in Austria. A collision in the Netherlands. A yellow flag offense in Hungary. Each one may look separate. Together, they begin forming a pattern that the championship leader cannot ignore. The grid penalty hurts one race. The license point can affect the season. And that is why this decision may matter long after Antonelli leaves Budapest. The immediate problem is 7th place. The deeper problem is pressure. Pressure to recover. Pressure to avoid another incident. Pressure to protect a championship lead while racing against some of the fastest drivers on the grid.